We're driving out in beautiful Ireland today in the backcountries, and as you can see, it's lush, it's green, and we're heading out to meet a researcher, writer friend of mine, David Halpin, who has been looking at the subject of ancient civilizations, the Druids, and these megalithic ruins containing ancient astrological calendars. And this is very exciting because not a lot of people get to go into the areas that we're headed into today, and it's sort of a specialty matter of his research. So please do come along for this journey today and stay tuned because it's going to get very exciting.
Hi Johnny, it's great to meet you here. Yeah, this is Castleruddery Stone Circle, and it's a really special circle. It has quite a few alignments. It has a solstice alignment, but I'm in the midst of researching a few more myself, particularly to do with star lore. And one of the things that hasn't really been documented so far with this particular site is how close, and I guess this comes from local knowledge. Because I live here, I've had lots of time to discover alignments myself with other stone circles. We've got Boulnabrone Stone Circle, we've got Bolton-Glass Hill, we've got Athgreeny Stone Circle. We've got so many places all connected. Some people have speculated that the connections actually could be a star map, but it's hard to know because there may well be other stone circles that are gone now, which would actually ruin that particular theory. But I wouldn't discount it at all. It's just that it's impossible to know. There are various names for this circle, but it's known as the Druid Circle locally. It still has a functional ceremonial purpose, and if you come here at certain nights, you'll meet some interesting people. And then other people come here just to pay their respects. Hawthorn trees, people will leave kind of their wishes and their hopes tied to the trees, make an offering in the centre of the circle.
And that's a tree that was said to be sacred to the Druids, was
absolutely, yeah. And there may well have been other trees here that are gone now. There may well have been an oak here at some time as well.
So I wanted to ask you, who were the Druids, and did they build Stonehenge as well?
It's a good question, and it's also, in a way, a question for which you'll get lots of answers. Mm-hmm. And what I find is, as I said to you earlier on, there are people who are equally qualified, have access to the same information, and still come up with different theories. So it's very hard to say. I would say that at the moment, the work of Gordon White is really revolutionary. He's taking us back a little bit further, and sometimes a lot further than we've previously gone with wisdom traditions. Followers of Horus are said to be the original Druids, but if you go back even further, where did they come from? So it's very hard to say who the Druids were. We have Indian connections, we have the British Isle connections, we have Mediterranean connections, and as I say, when you look at the evidence individually, it seems very strong. So maybe the best answer is it was a worldwide school, potentially, of wisdom teachers who came to the fore after the particularly cataclysmic events that took place between maybe 10,500 BC and 6,000 BC. And then we see kind of an Egyptian culture appearing around 4,000 BC, 3,500 BC, that seems to be fully formed. So if that was fully formed, it must have come from somewhere. And I think it has been said that the Druids come from Egypt, but yes, I would also say that before that they came from somewhere else.
Yes. Well, so today we're out at Stonehenge in Amesbury, England. And if you guys check them out behind us, there are the circle of stones that we see, and many say that they were built by the Druids. But others dispute this, saying that the Druids wouldn't be around in the Neolithic period from when they would have shown up. Of course, we know that Julius Caesar made mention of them, and the idea that they have a mysterious origin is not unfounded. They're not only aligned with the astrological calendars, but according to the great Michael Tazarian, he has said that Stonehenge is perfectly aligned with the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And the great megalithic henges have actually been described as doorways or portals. In fact, he says the word door comes from door, which meant druid. So we know there have been other discoveries recently using GPR, ground-penetrating radar, laser 3D scanners underground to see that there have been other monuments located underground, leading to further speculations for what it's been used for. There's also a stone in the back which has been called Helios, after the Greek word for the sun or the sun god, connecting this place to solar worship or sun worship, a complete astrological alignment, and there's these green stones that are connected to that. But we also know that there have been other discoveries recently over in Wales that look like an exact replica of the Stonehenge monument to show that it was brought from somewhere else. But what we need to do is let's go talk to an expert and see what they have to tell us all about Stonehenge and the history.
Sure. Well, Stonehenge is a prehistoric monument built 3,500 years ago. And it was built in the Stone Age period, the Neolithic period, neo meaning new and lithic meaning stone, so the New Stone Age. And Stonehenge, we know when it was built, we know how it was built, we have absolutely no idea why it was built. There are lots of different theories as to why Stonehenge was built, but we just do not know why. But what they did do was something absolutely amazing, because they dragged these huge great stones across the landscape for hundreds of miles to erect them here on Salisbury Plain. Sarsen stones, which weigh about 30 tonnes each, and blue stones from the Preseli Hills in Wales that weigh between 3 and 7 tonnes each, dragging them across the landscape, across mountains, across water, across valleys, to erect them here. For what purpose, we have no idea. Behind us is a Neolithic village, a recreation of a Neolithic village, and this is from archaeological evidence where we know that there was a village in this area and they were building the village for the builders of Stonehenge to actually live in while they were building Stonehenge. People have got many theories as to why Stonehenge was built. Some think it was built for religious purposes, as maybe an open-air cathedral, others for trade, others think it was built for ceremonial purposes. If you think it was built by the Druids for the Druids, you're wrong, because Stonehenge existed 2,000 years before Druids even came along. The most popular theory is it's a temple of healing, because the blue stones that form the inner circle of Stonehenge, they are 2 degrees warmer than any other stone. They're a form of volcanic rock and they actually give off heat, and so we believe people came here as a temple of healing, but we don't really know.
Have you ever heard the theory that the Druids could have come from, some far out theories that they came from the Atlanteans and the Phoenician Canaanites passed on things to them, or the Zoroastrian traditions? Because there's astrological rituals there with the alignment.
There is, absolutely, there's astrological rituals of the alignment. I'll be honest, I don't know, but what I do know for a fact is it's got nothing to do with Druids. Definitely nothing to do with Druids, because they were 2,000 years after it was built. So we don't know for certain, and we will never know why Stonehenge was built. There's lots of theories, but we will never know.
That's incredible. What kind of people are attracted to coming here?
Absolutely anybody. We get students, we get thousands of overseas visitors every year. Some people come to the United Kingdom just to see this prehistoric monument. They come here just to see it. Some people do come, they take one look and think, well, you know what, it's a big pile of rocks. But other people come and they reflect on how difficult it would have been to build it and align it with both the solar and lunar calendars to create the wonderful monument today. And it is just an amazing feat of engineering.
That's it. And I've heard some new theories recently about them scientists and archaeologists using GPR, ground penetrating radar, 3D laser scans underground, and discovering new things. And there was another theory saying the exact replica of where these stones would have been. They found a site in Wales?
Yes, they did. They did find a site in Wales. I mean, in the United Kingdom, we have somewhere in the region of 900 prehistoric stone circles scattered around the countryside. This is not the largest here, but it is certainly one of the most unique, because it's the only stone circle where they brought stones from far away to this point to create the monument. But yeah, there's lots of different theories coming out today, and as time goes on and technology improves, you'll get archaeologists discovering more and more that will maybe tell us a little more about it. I'm just not convinced we'll ever really know why it was built.
How about nearby sites?
Nearby, you've got Amesbury, which is about 20 miles away from here. That's the largest stone circle in this country. It's much, much bigger and spread over a wider area. And in fact, the village of Amesbury sits inside the stone circle. It is so huge. So that's well worth seeing. It really is. And also around the landscape here, you have what we call barrows, long barrows and round barrows from the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age people would build these grassy mounds with chambers underneath, and they would be their burial mounds. And you will see them on the landscape when we leave Stonehenge, these long and round barrows that are the burial mounds from the Bronze Age as well.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your
My
time.
pleasure.
You've been wonderful.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
My pleasure.
Now, the origin of the Druids is greatly disputed, as well as the name that we use for them. Max Mueller thought that it meant the great men of the oak. Eliphas Levi, the great transcendentalist, said that they were great medicine men and practitioners of the healing arts. There is thought that they would have originated from Atlantis due to the proximity of the British Isles and where Atlantis would be. And their traditions could also be connected to the ancient Persians and Zoroastrianism, since we know that this is a great astrological calendar, as well as its alignment that's used through the winter solstices. But one thing's for certain, it's very mysterious. You and Michael Tazarian have made a link to the ancient Egyptians in Ireland, correct?
Yes, but I would say there was a root. I would say they both come from Ireland, and the Egyptians have a common root. I don't think that Egypt is responsible for this kind of ancient Irish society. I think they integrated and met the people that were already here. Recently, we have evidence that Irish culture goes back a lot further than we thought. It goes into the Paleolithic. This ties into Gordon White's work. We found a bone with carvings on it, so we know that the Paleolithic people, hunter-gatherers, were a lot more sophisticated than we previously thought. They sailed, they made art, and there were different types of humans around at the time. There were Homo sapiens, but there were also Neanderthals. So that ties into potentially the idea of watchers, the Nephilim, the Book of Enoch, and so on. Perhaps we're talking about integration of different types of human beings interacting with each other. Maybe the originators of what the Druids were.
Yes, and a term that I was pronouncing wrong before I came to Ireland was, I used to say Tuatha De Danann, or the people of the goddess Danu who came here. And of course, the correct pronunciation here is...
Well, I would say Tuatha De Danann, but I would also add that Danann is a late add-on. It's two a day. The Danann part was actually added by 19th century scholars. In an article for Ancient Origins, I speculated that the two a day actually means thoughts a storm, which ties in with that Egyptian link. And phonetically, I think it's a fairly strong link. We also have DNA evidence now linking Ireland to people that came from North Africa, the Mediterranean, and perhaps even we know even further back from Africa originally. So there are strong links there.
And of course, we have the work of Graham Hancock, where he said that people came up from the lost continent of Atlantis, and they could have taught all these different concepts and mysticism and brought culture here. But looking at your work again, there is another area I'd like to explore with you, and that is when we look at these various polytheistic beliefs and these various gods that they would have served. You and I have talked about before Cernunnos, that many believe is depicted on the gunstrip cauldron, and the interesting shape that he's making in the body. He's holding the serpent in one hand and the infinite-looking symbol in the other, and he's in a cross-legged sort of yoga position, which you had given me some interesting ideas about that before.
Well, absolutely. We know that in Alexandria that there were Buddhist monks, so there may well be a connection there. But I would go even further back, especially when you talk about the serpent. The serpent is the oldest symbolic representation of a god we have. It goes back to the San people of South Africa, who are a hunter-gatherer society. And we found this particular cave dating back 70,000 years, where we found spearheads buried, offered to this snake god. Now, the snake god was also one representation of the trickster figure. The trickster figure is the first intermediary between whatever is animistic and almost beyond us, and what comes down to us. So that translation between what's beyond and what's human, the person that seems to help us is the trickster. The trickster doesn't always help us in the way that we want, of course, and the trickster can be represented by the serpent in the Garden of Eden as well. So we do have that serpent connected to almost all of the ancient religious beliefs.
Definitely, it goes around. So you've also made a connection to Thoth Hermes Trismegistus.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think some people make that connection to Enoch again. Again, I would say that probably goes back even further. It's a continuation of an oral tradition that's been adapted. But Hermes, again, it has that symbolic representation of the serpent, and Hermes is a trickster god, a messenger god, and the person that kind of goes in between. So,
yes.
And of course, Thoth was the one who brought writing, who brought civilizing skills, and there are connections there. Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Now, I know that we're talking about civilizations that are even far older than the Celts here that have been in Ireland, especially with Newgrange and places like that we've discussed. But looking at the idea of Celtic shamanism or shamanism existing amongst these people, would you say that that was a very important practice to these people?
I would say so. It's very hard to have definitive proof of these things, but again, we're talking about a pre-Celtic society. Pre-Celtic society that had astronomical knowledge. Now it's easy for us to say, that's fine, but to build something that encodes like the orbit of the sun, the moon, the stars, we can say it represents some kind of calendar, and I'm sure it does, but I also believe that it had some kind of ceremonial and shamanistic function, as you say. Again, Gordon White talks about the idea of the headless rite, which was a rite that Aleister Crowley basically. Aleister Crowley got in contact with an entity that he called Eros.
Eros.
And in the Great Pyramid, performing something called the headless rite. And the headless rite was a rite that was dedicated to Orion and to Osiris. And there seems to be that same thing about linking places on Earth to the sky. Yes. And it seems to be, the whole kind of idea of as above, so below. There's speculation, but these people believed it, and Crowley certainly believed it as well. And Crowley had a huge influence. He may not have had the influence that he thought he was going to have at the time, but he certainly had an influence now, and his influence seems to be growing. And I guess that ties into what you call shamanism is much more broad than we think in the West. It's not just something that comes from Siberia. It's South America.
Yes.
It's Aboriginal shamanism. It's shamanism of the Polynesian islands. It's everywhere. And what it is the instinctive knowledge. To my mind, what it is the instinctive knowledge that we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. And there are certain things we can do, certain states of consciousness we can enter that brings us back in touch with whatever that great outer consciousness is. It's part of us, and we can reconnect to it by doing certain things, by standing in certain places.
So we were driving along on the Ring at Kerry here, and we pulled over to the side of the road after we looked out in a farmer's field and saw the remains of a stone circle that is embedded in the ground. And these are all over the place, and they mean all sorts of different things. After our wonderful visit with David Halpin, he gifted us a book on the stone circles in Ireland that's by Jack Roberts. But also, there's various purposes that have been suggested for these circles. Some say that they could have been used for astrological calendars and alignments or rituals. And as David's fascinating work has shown us, that many of them are lined up similar to the Great Pyramid in Egypt or the ones at Chichen Itza, with the solstices as well as Orion. We look at Alpha Draconis. So look at this right over here. You have sort of a lentil door way that's being formed there. And obviously there's a piece in the center that's been used for something. And whatever was happening during the Paleolithic time or with these great peoples, these circles were very important to them. But most importantly, as we look at these giant stones that go underground, is how did they move these great stones around to build these monuments? Over there, we also have the remains of stone forts and this tremendous stonework that's been done. We're actually out in a farmer's field right now, and one of the most interesting things in Ireland is that you have something known as the rite of passageway, where we could just walk through fields and go and explore. Let's take a look over here. I agree with you, and it's been pointed out to me before by even Jordan Maxwell that he said that when and again, I don't know if I can back this up, but there's supposedly a connection with, you know how we call each other sir? Mm-hmm. The connection is Sirius. And, you know, when we look at dogma, well, that comes from the dog star. Right. And so, you know, even the pyramids, to even when we look at Stonehenge, when we look at Chichen Itza, they're all lined up with this the star configuration. And before we got here, I mean, you were blowing my mind with all the incredible places that you're pointing out in your research, which is fascinating. You guys want to keep your eye on this man's writing for these years to come. Watch his Ancient Origins articles, or read them. Watch them and read them, but watch them very, very closely, because the stuff that he's onto is cutting edge research. You are lining up star charts and showing us, you know, where these places line up. Now, when we look around us, how heavy are these? How difficult would you say they would be to move, to put them in this formation?
Again, it's very hard to know, because we think of sophistication in terms of metalwork. Yes. Because of the way our kind of culture has gone. But the people of the Neolithic and maybe the Paleolithic were much more adaptable in terms of using stone. They knew the properties of stones. They knew the way to move them, basically. Yes. You know, that's all well and good, but to get them to align then to sunrises, yes, is something else. There is a theory, of course, that in terms of the Great Pyramid, there were actually molds, and that's something I'm looking into. I think it kind of solves a lot of problems. So, but then the stones here obviously are all natural. Like there's no mold here at all.
And there's something else very interesting that you said to me that I've thought about, and I've actually written down my thoughts on this before. That, you know, when people form a séance, mm-hmm, or they're doing a healing session, it's always in a circle. And you were talking about these electromagnetic fields, and we were talking about fairy rings and crop circles, like the old story of Llewellyn and Rhys. This being in a very particular circle alignment, is there most certainly, like, you know, is there an electromagnetic grid or a function for the energy, this being in a circle, you think?
I think you could be right. I think there have been measurements taken at dawn in particular. There are certain rises in energy. What it means, I don't know. But one other aspect of this, Johnny, that I haven't really got into is I didn't intend on writing about these places, and I didn't intend on bringing attention to them. But what drew me to the circles and the dolmens was the state of neglect that some of them are in, and the kind of disrespect that they're shown. Now, you speak about energy. The circle, if we look above us here, we have just a careless electricity pylon just gone straight over it. So if there was some kind of subtle energy, surely it's kind of being tampered with because of that. Plus the aesthetic kind of effect. It's not very nice. You know, you have this ancient circle dating back to conventionally 3000 BC, but maybe even older.
Probably much older.
Then someone just puts electricity pylon across it, like, you know, without.
And you said, and you and I were talking earlier. You said that you would like to see, you know, some gentle, respectful, you know, excavation happening here.
Absolutely, like on some level, you know, I understand that there are places like this are sacred to a lot of people, and I understand that we shouldn't destroy them or tamper them at all. But there are sensitive pieces of equipment we can use now to see what's under stones, to see what's there may well be further alignments under the ground that we don't know of.
That's it.
It would be nice to know.
They now have that GPR, ground penetrating radar, 3D scans. I mean, they just did that one find, or they had a find over in Wales, where they claim they found that replica of Stonehenge.
Yeah.
And I mean, now it's getting so sophisticated. One thing's for certain, I think it's pretty incredible that it leaves us with giant question marks and the mystery of, why. Well, most were saying, why did they build these places? Where did they come from? Do you have an idea? Do you believe, after looking at several of these sites now, is there no doubt in your mind that these have been used for ceremonial uses, or were they for energy practices, or what do you feel they're used for?
I don't think that the people who built these places saw a difference between energy and ceremony. I think the idea of ceremony was to affect energy. That would be my own opinion, and that just comes from looking at shamanistic practices in other countries.
Yes.
And again, it comes back to the fact that, to me, we all have the same root anyway. So therefore, the practices must have. They were known by different people and they spread out to different countries. But yes, there was a reason, and it comes down to this getting in touch with whatever is beyond ourselves, knowing instinctively that there is a connection there and there is a way to make contact with
There's no doubt about it that there was a mystical class called the Druids that existed in these parts. Not only were they trained in all sorts of mysticism, did cloud divination, and had sacred knowledge, but we know that various trees were sacred to them, such as the oak, ash, and thorn. They also had the ability to stop kings from fighting. Many have speculated where their names came from. Manly P. Hall has looked at the idea that they came out of the ancient mystery schools and could have been related to the Pythagoreans. We can look at Eliphas Levi, who also looked at the name Dryad from the Greek and said, hey, that there is an idea that these could have been the ancient tree people or the men of the trees. But there's no doubt about it, whether you think they came from the Phoenician Canaanites, or as David and I discussed, that maybe they came out of the ancient Egyptians with the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. They existed and they were here. But one thing we do know that they had was this tree alphabet, which is very interesting because the Celts, for example, never had a written language. They just had Gaelic and storytelling to preserve their traditions. But when we look at the Ogham alphabet, which were said to derive from Ogham, which is very interesting because there's a parallel to the story of Odin when we look at the idea of where the runes came from, the Norse runes with hanging off the world tree and the stories of Yggdrasil. There are parallels in the mythology here, but we drove out to Killarney here in the Ring of Kerry today to check out the oldest known collection of these Oghams, and they're all recorded in here in stone. So check this out. Come along with us.
So here we are doing the name, Johnny's name, in the old Celtic script called Ogham or Ogham, and as you can see, it's written from the bottom to the top. It was written on the canter of the stone, which is the side of the stone, and it was written in Latin. So we're doing Johnny, which is J-O, which comes from the bottom, and it takes its name of Ogham, which is the Celtic god of literature and eloquence. And when it came to Ireland around the end of the 3rd century, each letter was associated with different trees, and 13 in particular representing different months of the year. Jon. N again. And last but not least is the Y, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Jonny.
So we're with Thomas here in Ireland, and Thomas, where is this place? Like, what is that behind us?
Okay, so you're at Poulnabrone, which is known as the Hole of Sorrows. It's a 5,000-year-old tomb, and it's a portal tomb. The reason it's called a portal tomb is its entrance into another realm. And as I mentioned previously, the water is very important for a portal tomb, because behind the portal tomb here, the water source has ceased to exist over many thousands of years, but it would be predominant back then. The water source has houses that are around. They are using the water for themselves, but there's a water source, a stream, and a small fountain there, and it assists the spirit to go into the next realm. This is a very interesting tomb because of over, not only in the Neolithic times, but over thousands of years it was used for ceremonies, and particularly for, even to recent times, even to like last year and the year before last, people would come here with ashes and scatter their ashes among the tomb. It's not prohibited, it's prohibited, but it happens still to this day, to try and allow them entry into the other realm, the portal tomb. Another thing about this tomb, they found the remains of over 30 people, but over different periods of time, for thousands of years, as I mentioned. And it was also believed that it was a place of sacrifice. So they believe that it's possibly called, Poulnabrone is called the Hole of Sorrows, and it wasn't called as the Hole of Sorrows for nothing. But sacrificial humans was different. Wasn't actually you're being sacrificed unwilling. You were born. You would know from birth that you were going to be sacrificed. It was an honor. Yes, it was an honor, to be sacrificed to the gods, because you would automatically get entrance into the realm of the gods.
That's incredible. And I know you know a lot about the Druids, and when I first met you today, I was asking you about the Druids, where they came from and their traditions.
Yeah.
And you were telling me about how they were trained in some very interesting skills and arts.
Well, a Druid, as you might know, was actually the wise man of the tribe and of the clan. And basically, a Druid would advise the clan. He was very knowledgeable. It was many, many years of studying and training to become a Druid. Possibly 30 or more years continuously throughout their lives. So a Druid would be learned thought initially about plants, the nature, the importance of nature, and how we are, our connection with nature, and how we are part of nature, as we are, and so forth, and how nature will heal us automatically, and the various different plants that were used to heal. And then another thing that were used as well is Druids would also know a lot about the astronomy, and even to this day, we have a place in Newgrange which happens on the 21st of December. Thousands of years later, this light falls through this chasm and lights up this inscriptions that are on this table. So it's still to this day, over 5,000 years later, that the alignments of the planets and the light still shines through, to have very, very deep understanding of astronomy. And one other thing about it's believed that a lot of these stone forts around Ireland were actually in a constellation. So they were actually a constellation of stars placed in Ireland as well. And that's when Christianity came in around the 7th century. They actually placed their monasteries on them, and then that's when you had the lookout towers. But the Druids, going back to the Druids, they would be the person within the clan that would advise the clan on where to fish, what type of soil to use for various different crops, and if there was a dispute within the clan as well, he would listen to both parties, if their belief was I was in the right or who's ever in the right, they'd listen to both parties and then they'd make a decision. So a like a wise man of the clan as well. What else? The Druids. Druids were very well so known to history and also connector of the word, so they'd know various different language, probably Romanic, so they'd know Latin, which is one of the most important ones back in the time, the old Gaelic as well, and various other languages that were present at the time as well, which is Germans, which is the basic Germans, which has come from English today. Another thing about the Druids as well is they would have been able to foresee what's happening with as the seasons change and all that, and they'd advise the clan on where to go and where's the best places to, because they were nomadic. Okay.
Now, when we look at the Oghams, or the ancient tree alphabet of the Druids, we know that they were used for multiple things. Not only could they be used for divination purposes, in the same way that you would use the runes from the Norse system, but they could also be used for spelling out and conveying ideas, or for ritualistic purposes. These particular stones that we see here that have the Ogham runes, they predate the 5th century, as well as we know that some of them were found even being used on the top of roofs for local churches and buildings. But over here again, we have the collection of them. It's also been said that they were divided up into 3 various sections. Again, based on the trees that were sacred to the Druids, as well as the 3 sections would correspond to the 3 class of Druids, and then you'd get the chieftain that would be at the top. But very, very interesting, all the ancient history around here, and stone monuments and circles. You know, they're everywhere you look in Ireland. There are these ancient relics and stone monuments and areas that shows that there's a lost science here. There's a connection to consciousness that we've lost touch with, and I believe now we're starting to put the puzzle pieces together.
So, could you tell us about the history of the Oghams?
The Ogham, it's pronounced Ogham actually,
Okay.
because the G is silent. If you look at it, the Ogham script basically, here's from many books where you can see it's connected to various different trees. And so it's written from the bottom of the stone towards the top. And there's approximately 340 stones in Ireland. The majority would be in the coastal regions, and in particular on the Dingle Peninsula. And the reason for this, after many years of investigation and research, is that Dingle was used as a natural harbour. If you look how Dingle's positioned, it was a natural harbour. And the majority of boats and ships and that would came to Ireland. If you look at Dingle here, you'll see that they arrive here, this area, okay? Because it's protected from the ocean. You can see it's the harbour there. So anyway, a lot of the stones are there. And as I say, it's written on the canter of the stone, which would be the side of the stone. And it takes its name from Ogham, which is the Celtic god of literature and eloquence. And they were written also on wooden staves. So they were actually, they'd go around and people would write them. They were written in Latin, which is very interesting.
Have you seen the monument over at the Ring of Kerry, where they claim to have the oldest recorded version of on the stones?
Is that down towards Kenmare?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's 2.3 meters high. Yeah, I've seen that. I went down there. I was very disappointed because the man asked me to pass and pay him I think it was like a couple of euros to give it to, and it's on public land. And in order to pass through, he made a way that you'd have to go through his land to see it, which I thought was a bit, I did see it. Yeah, the claim. Well, I don't believe that. I believe he's wrong. Could not be the oldest, possibly in Ireland, but not the oldest Ogham script in existence, because as the Celts travelled throughout Europe from the Rhine Valley, they've used the Ogham, and the Ogham can be found as far away as Czech Republic, and even into Hallstatt and that particular area as well. So this Ogham script is adapted throughout different times, as it's such a lengthy period of time it was in existence and used, that it adapted to different countries, had different dialects and so forth. So the Ogham script can be found many variations of Ogham script. There's even a Hebrew Ogham.
Yes.
Yes, as well. So I don't know if that man was mentioned there. So it's written from the bottom to the top, and each letter corresponded with a different tree, and then 13 were chosen, in which the tree, the cycle of the tree, something significant happened in the cycle of the tree. So you can see in this particular book here, which is this one by Niall McCutter, about Irish trees and its connection with the different months of the year. So on this particular page here, it begins with Ida, which is the Gaelic. So here you can see the Ogham script, the lettering in Gaelic, and then the tree corresponding, and then the month that it corresponds to. So it starts with the yew tree, which is November to, these were lunar months. As you can see, it's 28 days. So it's yew, pine, birch, rowan, alder, willow, hawthorn, ash, oak, holly, hazel, apple, and elder. Although many other trees and shrubs as well were chosen, these are ones that were particularly predominant at that particular time, and something significant happened in the cycle during that month. Okay.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Michael Tazarian, who comes from Ireland here, actually from Belfast, he had a theory in his ancient origins of civilization in Ireland that the word druid meant door, or like door, and then others like Eliphas Levi connected dryad to working with the trees, and of course we see them as the great tree people. Where did this association with the oak, ash, and thorn?
Well, basically, as you know, most things would have been made out of wood back then. So you can imagine, wood has different properties. Okay, so if you're using obviously harder woods like oak and so forth, you wanted something that protection. So you'd want something that's like, if you're going to battle, you want a shield. Okay, but if something flexible, you want something that's light, flexible, and all that. So you use ash. Ash is a very flexible, wood as well. They use it even to this day. We use ash for making the hurleys. And so, as the different woods have different, uses. So that's how they associated different woods with different trees. And basically, the old, I assume as well that a lot of the old, and I've looked into as well, that a lot of the old traditions, like where the rowan tree is being protective, and the hawthorn is a fairy tree, and the different associations are also integrated into that belief as well. And then obviously when the Celts, or when you have the Vikings came to Ireland around the end of the 7th century, they seen this script in existence, and then they instigated their own script, which is known now as the runic writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with the Druids, they are. Some believe that they were the ones who created these stone circles, and there's all sorts of different theories about the stone circles, that they're built on ley lines and there's electromagnetic grids, and as you mentioned, there's astrological calendars. Do you believe that there's something that can open up ritualistically when they're used properly, when you open up a circle with them?
Well, I mean, it depending on obviously if it's with the moon and that. Obviously with the alignments of the planets and that, because as you know, they were very, very highly in-depth knowledge of the astronomy, and so when they had, as you know, you can see it's 24th of June and 21st of December, and the different months when they have Beltane and so forth festivals, they were all aligned with nature and also with the various different planets. So it could be possible that, like, the spirit world, as you say Halloween, which is when the spirit world, they believe, is closer. The spirit world is closer to the human world. But also in months when it's a lunar month, because we're obviously the humans were made majority of water, it affects us. That's called lunar, from loony bin. It's a logo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lunacy.
Yeah, lunacy, exactly, from the lunar. So, I mean, there is association with, the opening of portals and opening them, and the distance and the possibility of where it, wavers as the moon and the connection with the planets, because we're all at the end of the day, we're all celestial bodies,
I agree. And so with these sacred images that you make with
script,
the Ogham script, and you use the various sigils and symbols here, what do these mean? If folks at home watching wanted to get these and they wanted to order them, how do they get in touch with you also?
Okay, well, each letter, as I mentioned previously, is connected with different trees, and it's written always from the bottom to the top. And if they wanted to get one, well, the easiest thing is to just look up Ogham, which is OGHAM.ie, and that's it. You have the website www.ogham.ie, and there you'll have a selection of the Ogham script. You can order one, and we ship it anywhere in the world. It's free shipping, and you'll receive it with a bag, and it's a little explanation of the script, and with a little symbol on top of it, which could be the elements, which is water, fire, and earth, the spiral of life, or it could be the triskel, which is mind, body, and spirit. There you go.
I love that. With the symbol of the elements, it's so very important, because you can even go back to 3800 BC into Babylon with, Sargon, and they were talking about the primordial forces and everything coming from the elements, and then you see this sacred knowledge being preserved.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing to the culture and preserving it. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I was back home in Vancouver, BC, Canada, two friends of mine, David Whitehead and Christopher Rusak, told me I had to come to Ireland at the Hillatara and visit the old bookshop. So let's go in there and see if we can get some answers about what the Hillatara is, the Druids, and these sacred sites. Come on.
How do you do?
How do you do?
I'm Moros.
Hi, Moros. I'm Johnny.
Yeah.
And this is a lovely bookstore. So many old books and
Yeah.
lots of stories about ancient Ireland and the Druids. Could you tell me a little bit about the Hill of Tara
Oh,
and this
it's
place?
a very ancient place. It's one of the most ancient places in Ireland,
Wow.
you know. And you have, sometimes the boss is here, I'm only the babysitter. And when the boss is here, he can just show you film. He can pull down that screen and he can show you film, you know, of all the Hill of Tara.
Wow. So I mean, we have all sorts of stuff here.
Yeah.
The ancient books of Ireland.
Yeah.
Looking at the Druids, and right behind here where we are, that's where the ancient Celtic high kings would gather, is it?
Yeah, well, they had a yoke there earlier this year where they out in the field there, they had a high king,
Wow.
and the high king got married to the queen out there.
That's
So I think it only lasted 12 months. There's divorce on the map after that.
Sounds like most marriages these days. The what about the Druids? Were the Druids out there doing rituals?
They're doing different rituals in the field there on the sun. They pick the sun there. But they'll be camped out there and all have camper vans and all, and they'll be out there and they'll light their fire at night and have a few jars. You know, and then go to sleep for a while to get up the next day. You know,
So was this place highly sacred? Where there were all sorts of
probably
rituals?
was, you know, because down the road there you have Ratmave.
What about the wells? There's the wells of Tara that we saw people getting
Yeah,
healing
but
water from.
there's one well down the road there. You know,
Yes.
it's giving a bit of trouble at the moment, but we get it right. You know, it had to be taken out and there was weeds growing, roots growing up through the pipe. So we had to get that rid of them. So it's flowing well at the moment. But there's always problems.
Wow. And so how long have you lived here for?
I've lived here, I'm married 50 years this year.
Wow, congratulations.
Longer
Longer than the High King.
Longer than the High King.
We're at the Holy Well of Tara here, where people come to fill up water and get healing. And the question is is it healing because of the limestone that's in the surrounding area that's alkalizing the water, or is it healing because it's an electromagnetic property of this very holy site? Either way, if you looked out in there, you will see that there are pictures of people that they are looking to get healed. There are coins laying around. And this whole site is visited by people that fill up jugs of water that want to come visit. Good look in there. So this site is very sacred and important. So what are these other places that you're telling us about?
Well, Boulnabrone is another stone circle. I found a few things there that I can't really go into yet, but I certainly see, even in the name, it's to do with the cow, and that, to me that has something to do with Naphtali in Egypt. Have you heard of
Wow.
that? I think it's the stones seem to be in the same formation. There's a scientist, Thomas Brophy, who has done some work there in Egypt. I would love to know what he thinks of Boulnabrone Stone Circle. Boulnabrone Stone Circle is overlooked by Baltinglass Hill, which we spoke about earlier on.
Yes.
Baltinglass Hill seems to be a ceremonial centre of some type, and basically an observatory, I would say. I've been told by the High Druid of Ireland that there's a ceremonial bowl there that was used to measure earth tremors, which may well be the case, but it also may have had a ceremonial function, maybe to hold some kind of psychoactive liquid within it. I showed you an alignment that I see there as well with a star constellation, and when we come back to something like Crowley's Headless, right, maybe the starlight was meant to infuse the psychedelic liquid with the power of that particular god. Maybe, you know, it's a speculation. So there are various circles, all overlooked by Baltinglass, and to me that's not a coincidence at all. It must mean something.
Wow. Now, another topic I wanted to just throw in here really quickly, since I have you here, and I was absolutely fascinated when you brought this up with me.
when you and I were talking before about the precession of the equinoxes, where we know that there's an axile rotation point of the Earth, people traditionally say that the Earth goes through ages every 2,150, 2,160 years. We're heading towards the age of Aquarius. Traditionally, people think that. And you pointed out to me that there's a much more vast view of celestial mechanics, that there's sort of this movement of everything in the solar system or the universe. Is there any chance you could elaborate on that?
Well, what I'm talking about there, it's not my own research. That's just the whole idea of the yugas and the great year, as Plato called it.
Yes.
And just that, we go through ascending and descending stages of consciousness tied into the orbits that are so vast in time that we don't notice them. Walter Cruttenden wrote a book, Lost Star of Myth and Time, and it's tied into another book, an older book called The Holy Signs, and it basically talks about the 26,000 year procession.
Yes.
Some people call it 24,500 year. Some people even go further and say that there was a mistake made and it's actually in the hundreds of thousands, millions of years. There are scales of time that are just so beyond human understanding that you can get a bit lost, and it's so intimidating to think like that. But the crux of it is that right now we're ascending, so we're actually coming out of a particularly dark period, and what that will bring is supposedly a higher level of consciousness and awareness, a more spiritual outlook. But the science behind it is what's really interesting, because back in the 1960s, the chances of scientists saying that the sun was part of a binary system was non-existent. There's not a chance. Now they're saying probably 99% chance that we are in a binary system. In fact, we would be completely unique if we weren't part of a binary system. So the binary system may actually, the movement within the binary system may actually be what's causing precession, and that's what Walter Cruttenden talks about.
See, this guy knows his research. That it's amazing how you could break that down. You even had the specifics, the variations on the cycle. I love that about your work.
Here's some notches we don't know what they are really. People have speculated that it may be to do with light shining on them, some kind of calendar purpose, but the truth is we don't know. So that is really interesting. And it was obviously at some point it was part of the circle, but it's gone now. If you want to film this, actually I can tell you what happened with this particular circle, which I forgot to mention. Last century, the local priest didn't like having this particular place here, and he encouraged his parishioners to come and do their best to destroy it. The same with the circle in Boulnabrone. You can see big chunks taken out of the stones where people thought it was of the devil, but luckily for us, enough has survived for us to be able to make some kind of the discovery and interest of it.
Wow! So this one down here.
Yeah, so there's one down here with lots of marks on it. So initially, the way the shape is, I thought maybe it was some kind of constellation, but I don't know. It's too straight, although it does kind of extend down there as well.
Yes, it does.
And then you can kind of see, again, for whatever reason, we've got a kind of comb effect here, which is obviously not natural. It was obviously made for some purpose, but again, it's very hard to know.
That's incredible.
And actually, there's a good shot there. So on that hill there, that's Boulnabrone, and then beyond that is Baltinglass. And on the very top of that mountain there, Cadine, there's another monument of some kind, potentially an ancient temple, but it's in ruins, so it's hard to know.
That's incredible. Where is your work taking you now? Like, what are the next greatest finds for you? Where are they leading you?
It's hard to know. I'm concentrating on alignments around where I live, and I found a few interesting things that I hope to write about fairly soon. I'm hoping to show that when we look at places like this, we tend to look at them in terms of the solstice, and winter solstice, or the
Yes.
equinoxes, or whatever. But I think there's a lot more to star lore than we've actually uncovered, and I think they may have more to do with constellations than they do with the sun and the moon. Don't forget that the lunar calendar is older than the solar calendar
Yes.
for the Paleolithic people anyway. So if that's the case, we may find a lot more alignments.
Well, yeah.
And it's just that we haven't been looking.
Look at the ancient Chaldean word sin, and then we have sin AI for Sinai, and we know that the Jewish holy days are even based on the moon cycles,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So it's incredible.
And one of the reasons, I guess, is because the Metonic cycle is so complicated.
Yes.
It's a difficult cycle to even begin to decipher. Don't forget, the people who come to these sites are generally archaeologists. They're not astronomers. They're hardly ever anthropologists. And they certainly are never people looking into spiritual beliefs. I've never met one. I've worked in a museum. I've met archaeologists. Archaeologists don't look at these places in the same way. You know, if you get someone in to fix your cooker, that's not the same person you get to cook your meal. You know what I mean? So the person that comes to look at the stones is not the person you get to interpret what the stones mean.
Yeah, do you think modern archaeologists are wrong about Egypt, about the current age?
I do, but I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's a lot of the evidence is not there anymore. But as we spoke about, Schock's work showing the kind of weathering on the Sphinx is a good example where the geologists actually agree with him. So in terms of the science, no one is disagreeing with him. It's the Egyptologists who are disagreeing with him because their timeline changes if they accept his work. But his scientific methods and his results aren't really questioned. It's just the context that they can't fit it in. You know, it's like a jigsaw, and to use an old kind of analogy, you get to the end of it and you realise that there's a piece missing or there's a piece wrong. What do? Do you start the whole jigsaw again? You don't want to, but you have to.
You have to.
You know.
So can I ask you, how can people find your work and check out all the brilliant articles and everything that you write?
You can find me on Twitter at the moment, DW Halpin. And you can find my articles on Ancient Origins or occultum.net.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you coming out and meeting us. Great to speak with you. So we've traveled all around Ireland and over to Stonehenge looking for answers as to who were the Druids and what do these sacred sites mean. And as you heard from my friend David Halpin, there are all sorts of mysteries attached to these sites. And they show us that the people in these Neolithic times knew about astrological calendars. They knew about the winter solstice and these mysterious alignments that we see that are similar to the Great Pyramids in Egypt. And that leads us to asking questions like, were these people connected to the ancient Atlanteans? Because as Graham Hancock has pointed out lately, we see that there is a pattern when you look at Göbekli Tepe, Mesopotamia, Egypt, that these similar teachings look to come as if though they were brought to them by a group of progenitors, as we see with the Helios stone at Stonehenge, the astrological alignments, and the winter solstice being very important. And although we couldn't do any filming over at the Neolithic site of Newgrange, which again has been carbon dated to about 3800 BC, that's 5,000 years ago, that these ancient peoples had created a chamber room that is in the crux shape, so it's in the shape of a cross. And keep in mind that the cross is a very ancient symbol. We can date it back to Proto-Hindu times. We can date it back to the Egyptian Ankh. We can look at the Celtic cross, which is the shorthand symbol for the cross with the circle in the middle, the sun being divided up into the quarters of the year. That we know that they had this knowledge, precise astrological knowledge about how the universe works, how energy works, how consciousness works, which is absolutely fascinating. And when you look at the mysteries and our mythology, we know that Mithra, Horus, even in Christianity with Jesus, they all have a history and a mythology that is linked to their messiahs being born around the winter solstice, which is absolutely fascinating. At this place where we leave you today at the Hill of Tara, there is no doubt a great amount of mystery and wonder surrounding it. Not only are there sacred patterns all around this place which are visible from above or from an aerial view, but this was the meeting place of the Celtic High Kings. Others have said that there is an electromagnetic grid here. It's an absolutely fascinating and mysterious place. So I'm going to leave that with all of you. Who do you think created these places? Where did these teachings come from? Because surely these ancient peoples that we look to as being so primitive and just having stone cutting tools and none of the fancy machinery we had today that have created these great monuments at circles, they had some sort of knowledge that was given to them. They had some sort of teaching. And with that, I'd say that we should keep an open mind.